Oh, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are just going to give it a couple minutes for everyone to come in. If you want to go ahead and put in the chat where you're joining us from, what organization you're with, we would love to see everyone that we have on today's webinar. We'll probably just start in a minute or two. So if anyone's wrapping up meetings or lunch, they have some time to get on. Awesome. Hi, Mandy. Stacy. I am also in Minnesota, so nice to see another Midwesterner. Awesome. And we'll just give it maybe one more minute, and then we'll just start with intros and some housekeeping items. Awesome. Love to see where everyone is from in here. Okay. Perfect. I thought we can go ahead and get started at least with the housekeeping items and intro. Want to keep this at 45 minutes for everyone's time today. So thank you again so much for joining us for this webinar on Donor Advised Funds 101, all about what nonprofits need to know. My name is Bailey Houston, and I am from the Giving Block, and I'm super excited to be joined here today with Aaron Kahana from Chariot to talk all about what donor advised funds are, the benefits, how as a nonprofit you can integrate them, and some really tangible tips on how to add them to your fundraising strategy. So we have about 45 minutes for this webinar from start to finish. And so our plan is to have the first 30 minutes about being some content and some really great information for you to take away from today, and then save 15 minutes at the end to answer every and all questions that you might have on donor advised funds. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. That is easier for us to make sure that we hit all of your questions versus the chat. And we have some time kind of in the middle of this presentation to work through some of them as well as at the end of it. So again, any questions, feel free to drop directly in the Q&A, and we will make sure that we get to them. And yes, I see one already. This recording will be sent. So we are recording this entire webinar, and then afterwards we'll send out some follow-ups with some really great resources and a recording of the webinar as well. So with that, let's get into it with some introductions. To start, my name is Bailey. I am the integrations manager at the Giving Block. A little bit about the Giving Block for those of you who might not know. We work with nonprofits to fundraise non-cash assets more effectively with the goal of really enhancing your fundraising outcomes. So our product suite automates the giving process of crypto, stock, cards, and now donor advised funds, thanks to our really exciting partnership with Chariot. And with the nonprofits that we work with, we really want to help you increase your donors that are giving non-cash assets, increase your gift size, and really give you a ton of resources. So along with our product suite, we also have a ton of resources for nonprofits on how you can really take an active approach to fundraising assets. So that's a little about us and the Giving Block. And with that, I will pass it over to Aaron for an intro.
Thanks, Bailey, and Giving Block for hosting. It's great to meet everyone here. I'm Aaron Kahana, one of the co-founders and COO of Chariot. First, I just want to say, hope everyone on the East Coast is doing well and staying safe. I'm actually calling here from New York. There's a red, orange, haze, and obviously smoke outside. Hope everyone's doing well. I've been involved in the nonprofit space for 7 years now. I actually started a small nonprofit related to food deserts and nutrition. And at Chariot, we're trying to get rid of the headaches involved with DAF donations. That's everything from a donor's perspective to the back end. And we're really excited about this partnership with Giving Block. And if anyone here after the call wants to learn more about donor advised funds, DAF fundraising, or the Chariot technology, feel free to email me directly at aaron@givechariot.com. So that's Aaron, AARON, @givechariot.com. I'd love to chat.
Awesome. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into things. So Aaron's going to kick it off for us of really going through what are donor advised funds.
Yeah, so I guess simply put, these are specialized accounts for charitable giving. Individuals contribute to these accounts with either cash, stock, or even crypto, and get a tax deduction upfront. So they get no capital gains either. So these are very tax efficient vehicles for giving. Kind of like a 401k for charity. Some people use that analogy when they think of donor advised funds. From there, donors can recommend grants to 501c3 nonprofits that become donations. There are no payout rates or time requirements to give though. So without reminding donors, money can sit idle. So in 2021, a record $234 billion were held in donor advised funds. And finally, the last thing I'll mention on them is you can't take that money back. So once you give the money to the DAF, it has to go to charity. It's not yours. You can't use it for another purpose. The only thing you can do is recommend grants out of that donor advised fund to nonprofits.
So really all of that 234 billion is just sitting there only for the purpose of charitable giving.
Exactly. It's this huge pot of gold for charity.
Just waiting to be tapped into.
Yeah. And I guess related to that, that $234 billion number, sometimes I'll say it and it doesn't even like sound real. And a big reason for that is they're growing really fast. So, a few years ago, for example, in 2016, there were a little more than 250,000 accounts. Last year, there were over 1.3 million accounts with a little over 2 million DAF donors. So 2 million Americans used DAFs, which is really a lot. And I guess when they first came out, DAFs were mainly used by super wealthy people to give. They actually first were created in the 1930s, but it was really in the last 5 years that they've started to be used by millions of Americans. And there's a few reasons for this really large growth that we've seen in the last couple of years. The first is no account minimums. So in the past, it used to cost $25,000 just to set up a DAF account. Today, you can open up a DAF with many providers with no minimums. The account sizes of these DAFs have also decreased, and that's part of the democratization of these giving vehicles. And I guess just looking at stats here, like Fidelity Charitable, the largest donor advised fund, has a median account size of $19,000. That number used to be over $100,000. So again, these median account sizes are continuing to decrease. They're becoming democratized. The second reason, besides no account minimums, is lower fees. Some DAFs, they don't charge a lot. They used to be very expensive to have a DAF, but now some DAFs like Daffy charge $3 a month, which is obviously very little, less than your HBO or Netflix subscription. And then the third thing is they're being offered as employee benefit, and that's another really big reason for this growth. So 401ks also have become a really popular vehicle. 60 million 401k accounts, but they weren't always that popular. And the big reason for this was they were offered as an employee benefit. Same with HSAs, health savings accounts as well. And so similarly, donor advised funds are starting to follow this trajectory. So they're really in their infancy, and which is crazy to say because they already make up 15% of total charitable giving that happened in 2021. And that number is only going to continue to increase. So I guess, yeah, the next stat that's really crazy that we kind of spoke about before is like, there's $234 billion in these accounts ready to go to charity, like we were mentioning. And based on these kind of stats of number of accounts, so the 234 billion, and we also mentioned the 1.3 million accounts, DAF donors make up, 1 out of every 40 households in America uses a DAF, which is pretty amazing to see. And lots of Americans are continuing to use these accounts. Like we were mentioning, it's becoming democratized, but they're also giving out of these accounts. So even with kind of the complex, $46 billion were given to nonprofits in 2021 out of donor advised funds. And just to contextualize that number, because that number is obviously so large, it's hard to compare it to anything. Total online giving was around $60 billion that year. So DAF giving is almost as large as total online giving, which is a pretty crazy stat to think about. And the other thing I'll mention is it's not just older people who are using these DAF accounts. It used to be the average age of a DAF donor used to be in 65, 70 plus. The average age now is 55 for opening up a DAF account. And the fastest growing group is actually 40 and under. So you're getting a lot of millennials using DAF accounts as well. And I think a big thing to mention there is nonprofits looking to fundraise need to start meeting these donors where they are and how they want to give.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I know we didn't talk about this before, maybe it should have come up, but so who operates these donor advised funds? I've been mentioning these accounts, I've been mentioning donors have them, but where do they come from? How does the donor set one up? Where are they using it? Where are they holding this money? So I'd say there are two main broad categories of donor advised funds. The first are commercial donor advised funds, and the second are communal. So with commercial donor advised funds, they're basically sponsors, usually founded or affiliated by an investment management company or financial advisor. So I know I'm going from the right side of the screen to the left, a little bit weird to read, but just starting with those, because those are really usually the largest ones. Those are Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, BNY Mellon, some of the larger, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, all these financial institutions have donor advised funds. And a lot of people who are holding their money, let's say in stock or in some other type of asset in these accounts, can easily transfer their stock or their real estate or crypto or whatever they have in there to a donor advised fund and kind of have that no capital gains on that and very tax efficient transaction. The other side is community donor advised funds, which are sponsors whose name or mission identifies their goal serving like basically either a defined geographic, religious, or cause area. And those are like the Jewish Communal Fund, the National Christian Foundation, or the Chicago Community Trust, which is like specific to Chicago. And sometimes donors actually have DAFs with both of these. So a donor might have a Fidelity DAF where they moved all their stock, and then they actually might move half of their Fidelity DAF into the National Christian Foundation if that's important to them. So it's interesting to note that sometimes a donor will have multiple DAFs. It happens sometimes. And just knowing that you might get a donor who's giving to you from multiple means is important to note as well.
And do you know, Aaron, how many total DAF providers are out there? I mean, it's got to be
Yeah, so there's a little over 1,000
okay.
donor advised fund providers. New ones sprout up every couple of weeks, and there are actually a lot of modern ones that have come up in recent years. Daffy, Groundswell, Charity Vest. But I think that just to note, there's around a little over 1,000, kind of just to answer your question before.
Awesome. And I think before we get into the benefits of donor advised fund, I see that we have one more question that kind of, I think, relates to what you just were talking about of, has the democratization been universal, or has it really just been specifically for banks and institutions? Yeah,
so then the democratization has been pretty universal. I think on the commercial side, you're seeing that a little bit more than the communal side. But even on the communal side, you're seeing people open up DAFs younger. There's also a lot of legacy planning. So for example, a parent might have a Jewish communal fund DAF and then give their child, who's maybe like 30 or 40, a little bit younger, have them open up an account as well, like underneath that account.
Yeah.
So you're kind of seeing both in that type of giving.
And with the charitable legacy, it's almost like it's an easier route than forming a family foundation, right? It's like you can create the DAF account, you can have beneficiaries rather than going the whole route of a foundation.
Exactly.
Awesome. This is another good question that goes along with that. So is there a certain amount that have to be spent each year from a DAF?
No. So that's a great question. And I think that's kind of the wild stat of 230 for $1 billion. Donors don't need to spend any amount of money out of their DAF at any point. And I think that, part of that is reminding donors that they have this DAF and they have this vehicle and soliciting them and being proactive about it, as opposed to just waiting for them to give. Because I think without reminding them, sometimes the donor can forget, or they might just, not go to their portal very frequently or check it often. And I think that like in solicitation, it's very important to be able to kind of engage donors where they are and where they're being inspired. Not just having to go back to their portal to give, which we'll get to.
Remind them that there's an option to give to nonprofits. And I think this goes along with it as well, of a question about how long can the money just sit there and not be spent? There's really no regulations around that, right? Yeah,
so there's currently no regulations around it. It's a good question, because there's actually a lot of there's a few regulations actually, I think in the House, the Accelerating Charitable Efforts Act, and there's another one in the executive branch. I forgot the name of it off the top of my head, but there's a few things going on right now in legislature to push to have some type of payout rate. I mean, with foundations, we were mentioning foundations before, that they do have a payout rate, a small one, but they do have a payout rate. And it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if donor advised funds kind of have a similar payout rate or type of restriction around that, because currently they don't.
Yeah, that's really great. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in, so maybe we'll do one more and then kind of save the rest for our next section. But this is a really good one, kind of about the donor setup of what happens to the money in a DAF if the donor dies before granting it out.
Yeah, that's also a great question. And it depends on the donor advised fund provider. Some providers will actually just give that money to whatever the nonprofit they see fit. Some of them have a specific, if a donor had a succession plan of where they want that money to go to, like a legacy plan, whether that's specific nonprofits or even other DAF holders, they can do that, whether that's their kids or family members. And then the third option is some communal foundations have like, these are the 10 charities we give to, defaulted every year. And that's usually another reason why someone might have a communal foundation if they care about the mission specific of that foundation, of that DAF.
Yeah, love it. I think this is such a great overview of just really knowing how DAFs work at the most basic level. I'm sure there's so many more complexities to it as well, of really just knowing that the basics are the donor opens a DAF account, they give to the DAF account and they can write it off immediately, and then they advise the DAF provider of where to give. So with that, let's go into some of the great benefits that there are, not only for donors, but for nonprofits as well. So I will pass it back to you, Aaron.
Yeah, so I think it's really important for nonprofits actually to understand more about how DAF donors think, because once you further understand their psychology, you'll be better at finding and soliciting from them. So I guess to start, why would a donor open up a donor advised fund? And I think there are a few reasons. The first here that I think of is really the kind of tax-free growth. So unlike a tax donation, cash donation, contribution to donor advised funds have the potential to grow. And you can invest your DAF and the balance can grow tax-free. And this can be beneficial if you're thinking long-term with your philanthropy and want to maximize the impact of your funds over time. And I think the second thing related to that is really around the flexibility to give, right? Some donors have a problem, and this problem needs what I like to say is a time machine, right? The times at which you gain access to money, at which you want to earn and use that money like for tax purposes, are not necessarily the times where you want to give to charity. So they could be months apart, they could be years apart. You may come to a windfall of cash, but not sure where you want to give that money. And this complicates receiving the tax benefit, obviously, because income taxes are assessed on an annual basis. So for donors who want to give and give flexibly, DAFs are a great way for them to put that money. Let's say they come into a windfall of cash, let's put that money into a DAF and then decide over time, whether that's months, whether that's a year, 2 years, where they want to give those funds. And then I'd say the last reason is really organization of your philanthropy simplified, right? If you give to multiple charities, it can be really difficult, number one, to keep track of your receipts. Number two, to make sure you're giving to the places you want to be giving to. And with a DAF, you make one contribution and then recommend the grants to the charities of your choice. And what's great is you receive that one consolidated tax receipt, no matter how many organizations you support. And that makes things a lot simpler come tax time, obviously. But it also is a big reason actually why younger donors are opening up these DAFs, right? They'll have a principle, let's say, to donate a certain percent of their income to charity, and they want to be able to stay true to that goal. And the best way to do that is have all your charitable giving organized in one place, right? You could set a giving goal of the year and kind of give throughout the year with that DAF, but you'll know that once you put that money in that DAF, you can't have it back. It's charitable, giving money, and it can only go to one place.
No more trying to search for all of your receipts at the end of year, trying to find all of them to collect either.
Exactly. And I see, by the way, there's one more here, which is charitable legacy. We spoke about that a little bit, but it's kind of that, mini foundation almost that you can establish, and an easy way for you to make sure that your children or your grandchildren, whoever is in your family, can continue to give to charitable causes as well, and make that a part of what their values and what they do.
Yeah. And I think this is a really good question that ties into that as well. Of when a donor puts their money in a DAF, do they still have full control of where the funds are allocated, or does it depend on the DAF provider?
Yeah. So once you put money in a DAF, you have, I would say, close to full control of where it's allocated. Every DAF obviously is only allowed to give money to a 501c3. So no 501c4s, no 501c9. There are lots of other obviously charitable organizations. It can only go to a 501c3. That's the first thing to note. The second thing to note is some communal foundations may have specific restrictions on where they are comfortable with donors granting, like if it doesn't align with their mission as a communal foundation. But the commercial DAFs basically just allow you to give to any 501c3.
Awesome. That's super helpful. And this kind of goes with that too. Can a DAF make donations to charities outside the US / an organization who aren't a 501c3?
So again, a DAF can only make it to a US 501c3, but there are ways, like obviously fiscal sponsors, for example, where you can give that money to, I know Global Giving is a large nonprofit that gives a lot internationally. Obviously, you can give your donor advised fund gift to them and explain kind of where you want that allocated, and they can as a fiscal sponsor send that money to where it needs to go.
Awesome. That's great. So along with the benefits for donors, there's also some great benefits for nonprofits. So let's get into that if you want to go through these.
And I think you might not know any of these, or many of these donors, because they don't have a way to give online. Right? We mentioned there's like 2 million people in America using them. And I think that like the first thing I'll mention is these are major donors. These are really important people to solicit from. The average account size is $182,000, median account size like $20,000. And they tend to be a lot more intentional with their giving as well, right? They give to many organizations. They usually give much larger gifts. The average DAF gift was $800 from Fidelity Charitable in 2021. And I think, I mentioned this as well, but these givers, when you put that money aside, you tend to think more critically about where you're giving. And also you care more about the specific causes because you kind of start to identify as a giver. You're not just someone who gives to charity when you're asked, but you're someone who has a DAF, who has that giving account. And I think that, going back to this point, there's so many, when you think about where you're pulling, when you're soliciting a donor, it's great that you're pulling from credit card, Google Pay, Apple Pay, PayPal, Venmo. The optionality is great, but they're all kind of pulling from the same place, the donor's checking account. But ironically, there's no way to pay with your account specific for charitable giving. And I think something I'll also mention is these donors, we've interviewed hundreds of DAF donors, and I think every single one of them said they give with their credit card online, whether that's a peer-to-peer campaign, whether that's a donate form because it's easier, or whether that's just because they forgot they had a DAF, or forgot in that moment that they could give with that DAF to that nonprofit campaign. And I think we haven't gotten into this yet, but I think kind of a good segue is like this issue around giving with a donor advised fund being quite arduous, which kind of gets to this point, which is, the current DAF process is very disconnected. All right. If a donor gets solicited, they have to go back to their DAF portal, find the nonprofit by their name or EIN. Many nonprofits, for example, have, I know one of my co-founders, Drew, was trying to give to Dartmouth, and Dartmouth has, I think, like 30 or 40 EINs, depending on which class. And it was an absolute mess trying to figure out for him, how to give with his DAF to their organization. He had to email them, call them up, and submit a few forms. And finally, you could click submit. And obviously in payments, like the added steps is unneeded friction and gives donors many points to drop off. And furthermore, like none of this giving is done at the point of what I like to say is like the point of inspiration, right? If you get that link from a friend, or you see an ad on, your Instagram or something like that for a nonprofit, or you're at an in-person event and they say, hey, we're, raising for this event. You have to go back to your DAF portal, fill out all these steps. And finally, DAF giving is missing out on one of the most popular forms of philanthropy, which is social giving, right? Whether that's a peer-to-peer campaign or 24-hour giving day, you can't give with your DAF to these campaigns currently. And it's causing a lot of, like we were mentioning, unneeded friction and obviously donor drop off. And that's a big reason why there's $234 billion. I'll say that number again, just because it's really crazy to say, sitting in DAFs, that pot of gold ready to go to nonprofits.
Yeah, and I think you kind of covered that with this slide as well.
And I think there's tens of billions of dollars each year that could be going to nonprofits that aren't. We call this the friction gap. And like over the next 10 years, this represents almost $400 billion worth of dollars that could be going to nonprofits. And I think that like obviously DAF donors are kind of being blamed for this billions of dollars remaining stagnant each year. And we've spoken to many DAF donors, and it's not like they want to hoard that money. It's not their money anymore. It's not like they want to do something else with it. And I think there's obviously several contributing factors to this idea of kind of these unrealized donations. But one primary cause is the difficulty of making a donation with your DAF. I guess the last analogy I'll use is like, imagine if you had to make a bank wire every time you wanted to buy a pair of Nike shoes. And that's kind of what it's like to give with your DAF. You have to go back to your, donor advised fund portal and go through that. And billions of dollars are trapped behind these like login portals, emails, or even phone calls to make a donation. And even when you are able to submit those funds, you can't even partake in all the types of charitable giving that exist online.
Love it. And I think we talked about most of these as well. But again, while there are some really great benefits to donor advised funds, there are some downsides as well when it comes to the process. And I think what's great about this slide, it talks about not only the downsides for the donors, but some of the downsides for nonprofits as well, like waiting to get a check in the mail, the delays, lack of donor information. I'm not sure if there's anything kind of more specific we want to get into with this as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think, you hit the nail right on the head. We didn't speak about the nonprofit side as much, but obviously you're getting a physical mail. Sometimes it'll say the fund name. Sometimes it'll just be anonymous 2 to 4 weeks after they make the donation. And thanking the donors is obviously a mess. They're getting thanked 1 month or more after they send the gift.
Yeah, exactly. So now kind of figuring out some ways to address those downsides, let's talk a little bit about the Giving Block integration with Chariot, because this has really solved a lot of those downsides that we talked about, not only for donors, but for nonprofits as well. So we are super excited to have an integration with Chariot that now makes this DAF donation process absolutely seamless. So what's really exciting about our integration is now nonprofits can actually accept donor advised funds gifts directly on their website with the Giving Blocks donation forms. It just takes 3 clicks. And what's really great is, as Aaron was kind of talking about this, rather than a donor having to go to their DAF provider, submit all the information, they can actually donate on that moment of inspiration directly on your nonprofit's website. So it's such a great way to really capture those donors when they're there already on your website, inspired by the work that you're doing and ready to give. So a couple really exciting highlights about this integration, and then we'll show you how it works and how you get all of the data back to your information. The first highlight is really just that you can now accept DAF donations directly on your nonprofit's website. So when you go ahead and embed the Giving Blocks donation form, you can accept crypto, stock, cards, and now donor advised funds all in the same place. Donors are no longer having to leave your website and go through all the complicated steps. They can do everything in one single place without ever leaving your site. The other really exciting thing is that you can now actually collect and track donor advised fund information. So when a donor is making their information and making their gift, if they choose to share their information with you, you actually get access to that in real time. You can see when a donor has submitted a grant request versus just them maybe telling you and waiting 2 to 4 weeks to get a check in the mail. You can actually see in real time when a grant request has been submitted and know what provider it's coming from, the amount, and kind of when to expect it. And the other great thing is that you can actually track that information as well. So in the Giving Blocks dashboard, well, you'll see all your other non-cash assets or donations that you're getting through us. You can now also see donor advised funds, the donor information, all of that good stuff in one place. And the last is you're saving your donors a ton of time with all the really awesome DAF integrations that Chariot has. So Chariot has direct integrations with over 60% of the market, which means when a donor is in our donation flow, they can actually directly log in to their DAF, see their amount, and choose to give, which means you're also most likely probably getting a larger gift because they can see all of that information right within your page. So with that, let's kind of show you how it looks, because I think it's really helpful to see kind of the flow of what a donor would go through. So again, just 3 simple clicks. So this first image on the left-hand side, this is what the Giving Blocks donation form looks like. So as you can see, there's crypto, stock, cards, and now donor advised funds as an option. So the first thing the donor will do is go ahead and input their information. They can choose to be anonymous if that's one reason why they like to go the DAF route. But if they share their information, you as the nonprofit do get access to all of that, which is really great. The next step that they'll do once they click donate with donor advised funds is they will see a pop-up. Again, they're still on your nonprofit's page. They've never left, and they'll select their DAF provider. So they can type in here, whatever DAF provider that they're using, it'll pop up. Let's say, for example, I'm using Fidelity Charitable. I would click on that and it has me actually log in directly to my Fidelity Charitable account. Again, this is all within the pop-up. They're never leaving your nonprofit's website to do that. Then in the third step, what's really cool is it'll actually pull up in real time what their DAF account balance is. So you can see on the bottom of this example here, it says $10,000. That donor can see in real time how much they have in their donor advised fund account. And what's really cool about what Chariot has created is there's machine learning that will actually recommend an amount to them based on how much they have in their DAF. So you as a nonprofit also have an opportunity to receive a larger gift with that encouragement from the machine learning. They can boost their donation. And then the last step is they just hit continue and it's done. So kind of what it does on the back end is it then sends that information to the DAF provider, and the DAF provider will send you as a nonprofit a check. Sometimes you can get that in anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. But again, a super simple, straightforward process that's all happening directly on your nonprofit's website. And then the last thing from there of kind of covering another great benefit of this integration is that you then get that donation data directly in your dashboard. So within the Giving Blocks dashboard, you can see in real time when a grant request has been submitted through this integration, and you can see the donor's information. So on the left-hand side of the screen is a sample transaction detail of some of the great information that you can get, everyone from the donor's name, email. You can see what DAF provider they gave through. You can see a Chariot ID number. This is the same ID that will be on the check that you get in the mail. So it's all super easy to track. You can see the amount, and then you'll see what you receive after fees. So again, really great to be able to have all that information in one place. And this also works with all of our CRM integrations. So at the Giving Block, we have integrations with Salesforce, Blackbaud, Neon, Zapier, so you can actually have this information then seamlessly flow into your CRM, so you can see all of your fundraising data in one place. So I see one question on here that kind of relates to it from Kathleen. So this is all through the Giving Block. Our integration is powered by Chariot, but if you want to use this platform, you would sign up as a client to use the Giving Blocks donation form. Great question. Anything else with this, Aaron, or should we get into some of these awesome fundraising tips that we have?
No, I think you did a great job at showing the product. So let's do it.
All right. So last but not least, let's get some fundraising strategies for our nonprofits of how to really incorporate DAFs into your strategy.
Yeah. So I think even, before we get deep on it, from a high level, we see this like in 3 broad buckets: soliciting, converting, and engaging. First, around soliciting, there's really kind of 4 things we think about there, which is, one of them is that ways to give page, another is the main donate form, another is the peer-to-peer, and then live events. And you really want to be making sure you're hitting donors on all these different areas, and making sure you're soliciting from DAFs everywhere, because, you might have a specific page donors might be pushed to, or, they may just want to give with a credit card because it's so much easier and they'll make a smaller gift. So you want to hit them there. The next is around converting those donors once you get in front of them. And that's really around the speed of donating from a few minutes down to less than 10 seconds, which is what we spoke about. And then the last is the better donor experience and engagement, right? You're 3 clicks directly at the point of inspiration. And you're now able to get all that information, that contact information that Bailey was talking about, so that you can continue to steward those relationships. And yeah, in terms of like fundraising strategies, I think the first is really around educating your supporters that this is an option. You may not know, some organizations do segment their donors based on their DAF data if they have specific DAF donors. If they don't, some organizations don't. But regardless, telling your donors that they can make these gifts really seamlessly in like 10 seconds directly on your website is the first step. And related to that also is kind of telling the donors that this will help you track their gift. Right. Otherwise, you're just getting a blank check in the mail or something anonymous, or maybe you'll get some information on their giving fund name. But again, it's very disconnected. The second is around communicating with your team. So making sure everyone on the team, from development to, donor experience to really everyone, making sure that they're aligned on, first of all, what DAFs are, but, how do we raise more from them, and making sure that they're all touch points, planned giving side, the direct marketing side, are all using this tool as best as they can. And then I think the third is kind of crafting that communications plan to engage those DAF donors. And related to that is sending those targeted emails, whether that's specifically to DAF donors or whether, you're sending a general email and in it says, donate with your donor advised fund here. Every time, you have the donate, it has the donor advised fund donation. It links them directly to that page where they can make that DAF gift.
Yeah, I think these are really great tangible ideas for nonprofits. And a lot of the overlap we see with this is very similar with other non-cash assets, right? Like crypto or stock. You have to let your donors know how these kind of gifts can really impact your nonprofit and ways to give them. Because if they don't know that, they might just continue giving in their traditional way versus some of these non-cash assets that really have the power for them to give an even larger gift to your nonprofit there. Awesome. And very last one, tips for finding and engaging DAF donors.
Yeah, so we get the question a lot, like, where do I find DAF donors? And I think they're not hiding under a rock or anything. They are your donors, probably, most likely. And it's really just about making it as easy to give as possible for these donors, and also making it clear to them that you accept donor advised funds. Some of these donors might even forget that they had a donor advised fund, or may have put a ton of cash or stock or something in those funds 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they might not have used it for a little bit. And that's part of the reason why there's so much money sitting in them. So I think the first thing is really around just, again, educating the donors that they can give through this easy means, and also making sure that they know that they have this fund. Donor advised funds, these are some fun example names you could even say. And I think the second is reaching out to DAF donors in a variety of ways. So that could be anything from, like I was mentioning before, there's really like 4 main buckets there. That could be the main donate form, that could be peer-to-peer campaigns. We've actually seen a lot of success there because historically DAF givers were unable to participate in any peer-to-peer events, and live events too, right? You could have a live event and you could have a QR code on the page that links them directly to their, giving block, ways to give page where they can give with their DAF right away. So I think it's finding them everywhere. And also, you may have a planned giving officer who knows donors one-on-one personally, and those donors may have a DAF and they may say, I want to give 10,000, out of my DAF. And you could say, use this link. And I think the last thing is soliciting for immediate needs. So again, this money's sitting aside. It's that pot of gold on the sidelines. How do you get donors excited about using that money? And I think a big piece of that is like, going through something specific right now. We're launching a campaign this week, or, we have a 24-hour giving day, or we have some type of thing, going on. Giving Tuesday is obviously coming up in the fall, but, there's lots of opportunity there to solicit DAF donations for immediate needs. And that really has shown a lot of success in terms of kind of getting those DAF donors to start participating and engaging and using those funds, those $234 billion of funds sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah. And now what's great is now when they get excited to donate, they can actually do it directly on your page versus all the other steps that it used to take, which is awesome.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, that is all that we had for the content. So much great content. So I think with this last couple of minutes that we have, we can get through the rest of these Q&As. How does that sound? Perfect. Okay, so I'll go with this one maybe next. Aaron, do you want to talk a little bit about are DAFs taking the place of conventional workplace giving? I know we talked a little bit about it being a benefit for workplace giving, but I don't know if you want to take that one.
Yeah, I think they're in their infancy for sure in that. I wouldn't say like it's become a huge part yet, but you're starting to see that a little bit with certain funds. There's a donor advised fund called Groundswell, who is only going after workplace giving. Actually, that's their main way that they get specific DAF donors. And I think you're seeing more and more of that as a way to encourage people to give, and also as an employee benefit that, companies can say, we give this to our employees. We value philanthropy and all that.
Yeah, great one. I see another one. I can take this about integrating with Salesforce. So at the Giving Block, we do have a native integration with Salesforce, with Zapier, Neon, Blackbaud. So if you are using the Giving Block's donation form and using the Chariot DAF donation tool, you can have all of those gifts seamlessly integrate into your CRM that you're using, which is really nice. And you're not having to do any of those manual imports, mapping, things like that. It can all be done automatically. I see Every Action as well. Every Action, I believe, is available on Zapier. So since we have an integration there, you can go ahead and set up basically a way for the Giving Block's donation data to seamlessly stream into Every Action. I believe Salsa is also on there. Bloomerang, Every Green Light. There's a ton of really great options. But again, this is really nice because you're not having to do that manual import. You can just have everything seamlessly sync automatically. Copy of the recording. Yes, we will send out a copy of the recording after this. How about this one, Erin? What are DAF funds invested? Do the interest payments get paid into the DAF accounts?
Yeah, so anytime funds in donor advised fund like are invested, that goes directly into the account. So it's just more charitable dollars to give. That's also tax free. So a donor doesn't need to pay any capital gains if they, their assets appreciate within the account. But it all has to go to charity.
Yeah, great one. What about this one? What is the current status on donors using DAFs to pay down a pledged commitment? So basically, can DAFs be used to pay off a pledge? I see a couple questions about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. They cannot be used for personal benefit. So you can't use donor advised funds for tuition or anything like that. But if a donor says, I plan to give you $10,000, they're able to use that donor advised fund to make that gift.
Awesome. Yeah, I see a lot of questions about that. So that's really helpful. This is a good one. So I see a couple of questions about where can we find information about DAFs and how to apply. So if you are joining as a nonprofit, you wouldn't need to apply for any DAF provider, but maybe that question's more about if you want to have a DAF on your own. Do you think?
Happy to answer that if that.
Yeah,
if
do you want to go
yeah,
for
sure.
it? Okay.
Yeah, there's many donor advised funds to open up DAFs with. It's super simple. It's like basically you can open up one up today with a lot of providers for nothing in your account, like a $0 account minimum. And to do it, all you need to do is just provide your like personal information and your account setup. Like Fidelity is an easy one to set up with. Another one is Daffy or Charity Vest.
Yeah. And if you're a nonprofit, there's nothing that you have to do to apply to accept donor advised funds. The DAF provider is basically go on your EIN number, send you those checks, but there's nothing that you have to do as a nonprofit in order to apply to accept donor advised funds. Great. Okay, I think this is a really good one. How can we educate DAF users that they cannot use their funds for sponsorships, tickets, etc.? Do you get that question at all?
Yeah, we definitely do. It's a good question. I don't think there's like a simple, the simple answer, I guess, is just maybe putting something on the website on the ticketing event, saying something like, you cannot use your DAF funds for this purpose. And if they do give to you with those funds, you can ask them, can we, we're planning to use this for an unrestricted gift. Hope that's okay. You still have to pay for your ticket with a separate card, whether that's a credit card or, some other type of mean.
Yeah, awesome. And I see, maybe we just want to touch on this one more time. I see 3 or 4 questions about countries worldwide. So do DAFs apply to all countries or is it categorized in specific areas? Do you know if DAF funds exist in other countries, Canada, UK, etc.?
So DAFs do exist in Canada, UK, I think Australia as well. They are not as popular there yet, although they're starting to grow a little bit. But American donor advised funds, which is currently what Chariot's focusing on, can only pay, again, American 501c3s. I was mentioning before, kind of the fiscal sponsorship allows, some international organizations to get paid if they're part of a fiscal sponsorship that has a 501c3 arm in America. But otherwise, donor advised funds in America can only pay nonprofits, 501c3 American nonprofits.
Awesome. That's great. And I know that we are at time here. I'm just kind of going through to see if we have any others. I'm going to throw a poll up. If you are interested in getting in touch with someone from our teams to learn a little bit more about DAFs and how you can incorporate it into your fundraising goal, go ahead and just press yes on here, and we will have someone from one of our teams reach out to you with some more information on how you can get started, what options are available for your nonprofits. As a follow-up, we will be sending out this recording as well as some additional resources from both the Giving Block and Charity on donor advised funds and how you can incorporate them into your fundraising strategy. So stay tuned for those. Anything else, Erin, before we go ahead and wrap this up at 2:45 on the dot?
No, thank you so much for having me. Again, if anyone here after this call wants to learn more, I know there was a few questions, whether that's about DAF fundraising or the Chariot technology. feel free to email me directly. Always just one email away, aaron@givechariot.com. So Chariot our name and give before then.com, Aaron. And I'd love to chat.
Perfect. Well, thank you again so much for everyone for joining this webinar. Again, if you want us to follow up with you, you can go ahead and press yes to this poll and we will. But if not, expect a follow-up email from us in the next 48 hours with the recording and some other really great information that you can use moving forward. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your Thursday.